I'm not gonna put the camera down.
There we go. Okay. So if you remember, we're starting out with our photographs, and we're working on the plexiglass, and we're going to try to do an etching similar to the Rembrandt ones that I showed you. So if I pull this back, so you can see mine is just like yours. So I've got my black and white photograph on the back side, and I went over it with lines so I could see where those are. And then what I ended up with, you can see here on the green, is I've scratched into it trying to get the lights and the shadows that were back there. I'm trying to play off the curve of my hair against more vertical and horizontal lines of the background, so not at all, it doesn't all run together. Okay, so before you ink it up, you want to run it through the press and check for the emboss. The press is probably going to be high because we've been doing linoleum, so I just want to go through here and just see how this looks. It does take a lot of pressure because what we're trying to do is get the ink out of the scratches instead of just off the surface. So I run that through. It's good enough to push it, but I think we need to have a lot more pressure than that. So I know Buck's going to print here in a minute, so I'm going to try to remember where we were. So this is a half, and another half, and this is a half, and another half. Back through this way. It feels pretty tight. So I'm going to try to go with that. So you can see that it's making a nice even emboss. It's the same on both sides. It's not heavier on one. And I'll go ahead and pass it around. You guys take a look at it. But you can actually see the scratch lines in the paper. And so that's giving you an idea of how much it's pushing down. So before I ink this up, I want to make sure I've got some paper that's ready for it. Because once I get my hands all dirty, I don't want to have to handle the paper any more than I have to. So these have already been torn down so they'll fit. And one of the reasons you want to adjust this paper to get it into those scratches, to moisten it, will soften it, and it'll go into those paper spots better. You can just run it under the sink. You can soak it, but what I tend to do is I like to just use the sprayer, and I kind of get an even amount on it all the way around. And you don't want it to be glistening wet, dripping wet. You just want it to be moist. So I tend to sit mine down for a minute, just let it sort of soak in. I've got one that's already been soaking in. Double check my hands that they aren't too dirty. So what I'm going to do is this will be the paper that I put down once I've inked it up. And usually we have a couple blankets here. One is called a catcher. And the catcher, what it does is it takes all of the water that comes off of the paper and picks that up. The ink we're going to use is this etching ink. Okay? So just make sure it says etching. It needs to be really greasy, and you don't need a whole lot of it. So I'm going to come right over here and work in this area. So I don't want to scratch my work. I just want to sort of push it down into there where my dark areas are going to be. And this is probably more ink than I need, but I'm going to be a little heavy with it. And this is tarlatan. And what I want to do is try to keep all of my ink in the center so I don't have to clean around too much. And so you're kind of rubbing it in at first. And the burr is the raised scratch in the plastic. And you can imagine it having, more than just one side. It goes up like a little ridge. So if you go back and forth, it will catch it. Go up and down, it will catch it. So I'm just moving this around a whole lot, hoping that every part of the burr is going to catch a little bit of ink. Okay, now the way I'm doing this, I've got kind of like a dirty tarlatan. So this one's got a lot of ink on it. And then I've got one that's a little bit cleaner. And so this is the one that I'm going to start to pick up the ink and get it off of the print. So just like if you were trying to clean, anything else, you're just trying to lift up areas. By having the white paper behind it, it's real easy for me to see if I've got a smear off to the side. I'm going to try to get this to be as clean as possible, but this is my first state. I know I'm going to have to go back and adjust something. My eye is going to be too big, or something's not going to be shaded just right. So in my first state, I want to get as close as I can. So if I pick up my paper now, my hands are going to get that onto the paper. So I want to either use something like this to hold the paper, or I want to clean off my hands. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of cleaning off my hands right now. I'm going to use a pair of tongs to put this down. So the tongs will end up being dirty on their outside like this, but inside here, don't touch that, because that's what you'll pick your paper up with. So I've already checked this to see if it's going to fit, so I kind of know where it's supposed to go. I'm just dropping that down on top of it. Put a piece of paper over the top to protect it, just in case the ink goes through. So this is what I end up with. So I would want to come back in here and try to even out some of these lines. So I've just got horizontals and verticals. I might come back with diagonals. And I can see that I've put the ink down unevenly. So I've got a whole lot of ink right in this area, but I remember when I scratched this, I scratched it fairly evenly, and the outside edges aren't quite getting it. So this is my first state. I think I might need a little more information up above on my lip. This eye is looking good. That eye looks like there's just dark on the top, and there's just like a light area down below. The shirt's believable. I've got lines following the form of the collar. So, so this is what we're going to try to do next. So it's all scratching with the knife and the plexiglass.
Yes.
All right. So if you guys have a question about these, I'm going to start to videotape some of these little demos. That way, if we go through about 4 different processes and the end of the semester you want to come back, you can take a look at these videos again and kind of just see like what was the next step I had to do or whatever else. So as you can tell, I took the photograph on Tuesday and I'm printing today. So 48 hours is how fast it can happen. So see if you can't keep up with the class, and after you find a couple processes that you like, then see where you want to go with it for your final work. So pretty cool though. So, but you can see that the wet paper's a little bit different. It's a whole new sort of wrinkle to add to it, and also you won't be able to use cheap paper to get the effect. So if I run this through, even though I've got I ran it through once and got some of the ink off of it, but you'll find that dry, cheap paper just doesn't take the ink nearly as well as these real cottony sheets. So do you see how it just sits on the surface? Okay. So if I ran another sheet of nice paper like that, it would pull out some of the blacks. So that's why we have good papers in printmaking, and that's why a whole sheet of this costs like $1.80. So this is like a lightweight Reeves, but I tend to use BFK, which is about $6 a sheet. And but if I want to sell them and I'm selling them for $100 each, that's not even 10% into your stubs.
So we can't use the paper that we used for the last one for this one?
Yeah, you can use your Bristol. The Bristol paper will work. It won't work as good, but it will work. You just have to get it soaked, you have to wet it. So it needs to be damp through. And one way to tell if it's still damp or not, it should feel cool to the back of your hand, and it shouldn't drip. It should be dripping wet. So just moist.
So how much